No weapon in the arsenal of the Imperium or the traitor equals the Titan on the battlefield. In truth, a Titan has only 3 enemies: folly, hubris, and another of its own kind. Welcome back, Shardwalker. Do you feel it? The ground beneath us remembers. We tread once more upon a cursed battlefield, the site of a nightmare long past. In the toxic fog ahead, a colossal war machine stirs. The god engine Bellum Caelus rises, ready to march. But an unspeakable presence also awakens in those ruins, a specter of war hungry for vengeance. Steel your spirit, for the tale you are about to witness will test the very limits of courage and faith. Before we step into the mist, mark your place in this grand archive. If the promise of this tale stirs your soul, inscribe your approval with a like and join our ranks by subscribing. Strike the bell of notification, that you may be summoned whenever a new grim saga emerges from the darkness. Remember too, Shardwalker, that not all battles are fought with bolter and blade. Many wars rage within the human soul. We stand with those who fight such inner wars, and we honor the noble fellowship of Stack Up, who lend aid and solace to warriors and veterans. They are a beacon in the darkness for those who suffer alone. If you wish to further support our crusade, you may offer tribute through the Ko-fi shrine. Know that your support is appreciated, not mandated. All links are scribed in the archives beneath this transmission. Now steel your soul, Shardwalker, for the march begins. The story, Specter of the God Engine, unfolds, and the drums of war thunder once more. Night on the blasted frontier was deathly quiet. A veil of unnatural fog clung to the abandoned trenches of Perdition's landing, turning the cratered earth and twisted razor wire into ghostly shapes. 5 Imperial Guardsmen moved carefully through the muck of a shattered forward line, their boots sinking in mud slick with oil and blood. They were scouts, sent to investigate whispers of lights and movement ahead. Only their ragged breathing and the distant rumble of artillery far behind broke the silence. The squad's sergeant held up a clenched fist, and the unit halted. The pale green glow of their visor lenses cut through the mist, searching. All around them, the world was a haze of swirling grey. The sergeant's gut churned with unease. This was the same damned fog reported weeks ago. The toxic mist that came from nowhere and swallowed whole companies of men. Only the Emperor knew what lay beyond each few paces of visibility. He gestured for one trooper to check the Auspex scanner. The trooper adjusted the brass device, giving it a tap as it sputtered. "Sergeant, Auspex is glitching again," he whispered. The handheld screen flickered with static and phantom blips. The sergeant's vox bead also hissed in his ear with odd bursts of noise. He tried to tune it, and for a moment he caught something. A broken transmission, a voice crackling through layers of distortion. Shadows in the fog. "Emperor, Otectus." The squad exchanged nervous glances. A flamer trooper at the rear muttered a prayer under his breath. The sergeant's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors of an entire patrol vanishing out here last week, leaving only eerie Vox recordings behind. "Stay sharp. Weapons ready," he ordered softly. The fog seemed to dampen even his voice. They pressed on, advancing yard by yard past collapsed bunkers and shattered trench boards. In the silence, every drip of water and creak of gear sounded unnaturally loud. Another soldier swept their flanks with his rifle's night sight. "This place is a grave," he murmured. Indeed, the sergeant could make out shapes on the ground. Corpses half buried in sludge. Empty eye sockets staring at nothing. No shell craters or bullet wounds marked them. A shiver ran through the squad. These soldiers looked like they'd simply fallen to some unseen horror. Suddenly, the point trooper froze. "Sir, do you hear that?" he hissed. The others halted, hearts pounding. At first, the sergeant heard nothing. Then it came. A faint, deep thoom, thoom, like giant footsteps far in the darkness, reverberating through the ground. Too deliberate for artillery. The sound was drawing closer. A shape loomed in the fog ahead, a towering silhouette edging into their infrared scopes. The outline stood impossibly tall, 4 or 5 times the height of a hab block. It moved with heavy, thunderous strides. Through the haze, vague details emerged. Were those great metal limbs? Gun barrels on its back? Emperor's mercy. That can't be one of ours, a guardsman gasped. An ear-splitting, horn-like bellow suddenly blasted through the mist. The fog itself rippled with the sound. Panic seized the squad. The flamer trooper screamed and unleashed a jet of promethium into the grey void. The night erupted in chaos. An earth-shaking impact knocked the squad off their feet. The sergeant saw one trooper yanked, shrieking, into the air. Las fire flashed uselessly into the fog. Another guardsman's muzzle flashes briefly lit a hulking, clawed silhouette in the mist. An instant before he was rent apart. Static overwhelmed the vox beads. All around, soldiers were dying in screams and spurts of blood. The ground shook again as that gargantuan shape closed in. An engine of nightmares half glimpsed through swirling fog. The sergeant realized with dread certainty that this was no Imperial Titan. It was something else, a walking blasphemy in the dark. "Emperor, protect us," he cried out, just before everything dissolved into white-hot pain and then silence. Some hours later, as dawn's first weak light bled into the sky, the storm of interference lifted. Emergency Vox traffic from the front lines told a grim story. Multiple patrols, and even whole companies had vanished in that poisoned fog, their final transmissions speaking of a giant shadow moving in the mists. Commanders on the embattled world knew only one thing could wreak such carnage and fear. Either a traitor Titan had joined the fray, or some warp-born horror of equivalent might. With mounting desperation, they petitioned the Adeptus Mechanicus for the god engines of the Legio Titanica. And on this new day, the Imperium's answer came. Atop a distant ridge, backlit by the sickly morning sun, stood the silhouettes of Titans striding to war. At their head was the Warlord-class battle Titan Bellum Caelus, its colossal frame emerging from the haze like a vengeful god. The ground quaked with each titanic footfall as it advanced towards the ruins of the city. The god engine had arrived to face whatever specter lurked in the fog. The Bellum Caelus stood in its embarkation cradle like a slumbering giant, its adamantine hull adorned with faded honor banners. The hangar deck quaked as the god machine awakened. Servitors and red-robed tech priests swarmed around its massive feet, their chants echoing off rusted bulkheads. In the Titan's shadow, Princeps Aurelius Valen strode toward the command throne, his every step confident and unhurried. He wore the interface harness like a mantle of office, neural jacks glinting at the base of his skull. At the feet of the towering command throne, Moderati Primus Lyra Antolis waited with a data slate, her posture ramrod straight despite the tremor in the floor from the Titan's awakening heart. Beside her, Moderati Secundus Dren ran final weapon diagnostics, his youthful face lit by the flicker of holo displays. Engineer Castus hovered near a console bank, mechadendrites clicking softly as he intoned the canticle of activation. Valen climbed the narrow gantry to the throne. The seat was an imposing throne mechanicum, a nexus of cables and pistons nestled within the Titan's armored skull. He lowered himself into it reverently. Lyra stepped forward to strap him in, connecting thick cables from the throne to the ports along his spine and neck. The Princeps suppressed a shiver as the first pinpricks of the Mind Impulse Unit, MIU link, bit home at the nape of his neck. He exhaled, steadying his breathing. This moment, the bonding with his god engine, always felt like standing on the precipice of a storm.
Mind link integrity at 98.7%, Princeps.
Lyra reported, her tone crisp to mask her own excitement. Valen gave a curt nod. Around them, lumen strips flickered red, warning of imminent reactor start. Castus's voice rose in a metallic chant.
Omnisire, bless this vessel. Ignite the sacred fire within.
At his signal, a pair of servitors turned keys simultaneously at control altars far below. The Titan's plasma reactor roared to life deep in its core, a low thrum building into a thunderous hum that vibrated through every panel and plate. Valen felt the surge as a physical rush, the god machine's first waking heartbeat pulsing through the MIU into his own nerves. Lights and data flooded his senses. He blinked as his vision swam, momentarily seeing double, the hangar bay from his own eyes, and overlapping that, a ghost image from the Titan's optical sensors high above. The two perspectives aligned as the neural link calibrated. Now he was the Titan, and the Titan was him.
Machine spirit is waking.
Engine Seer Castus droned from his station. His augmetic eye lenses reflected columns of binaric script cascading across his console.
Rite of awakening holding stable. Spirit within is eager.
There was a note of strain in his mechanically filtered voice. The Bellum Caelus' spirit was always ferocious, hungry for battle. It took a strong will to master it. Princeps Valen braced himself, exerting his mental dominance through the MIU. In the immaterium of the link, he felt the beast stir, a colossal predatory presence brushing against his mind. Steady, he commanded silently, like a lion tamer faced with a caged beast. The spirit receded begrudgingly, brought to heel for now.
Reactor at full output,
Lyra announced.
Void shield generators warming up. Void's nominal.
As she spoke, a faint blue shimmer danced briefly across the Titan's hull plating. The overlapping fields of the void shields flickering to life, ready to deflect incoming fire. Dren looked up from his targeter cogitator and grinned, the green glow of runes painting sharp shadows on his cheeks.
All primary weapon systems report optimal, Princeps. The Bellum Caelus is ready to march.
There was youthful zeal in his voice. Valen couldn't fault it. The thrill of such power at one's command was intoxicating. Outside, a klaxon blared 3 rising notes, the all clear for deployment. Through the Titan's senses, Valen could feel the massive bay doors ahead rumbling open, a slice of bruised purple dawn visible beyond. He caught a whiff of the outside air through the Bellum Caelus' exterior Auspex vents. Even filtered, it carried the stench of soot and something acrid. The war-torn world beyond awaited, cloaked in its eternal fog. "Princeps," came a crackling voice over the Vox the Forge dispatch officer. "Engagement orders confirmed. You are to proceed to Grid 7-9er, Perdition's landing continental manufacturum zone. Auspex has detected a Titan-class contact in the ruins. Possibly a traitor god engine. Emperor protects." Valen's gauntleted hand closed around the command levers. At last, a worthy foe.
"Acknowledged,"
he voxed in return, his voice echoing both in the cockpit and from the Titan's external amplifiers as a booming declaration.
"Bellum Caelus moves to engage."
Beneath him, the Titan's servos howled as its enormous weight shifted from the cradle to its own feet. With a ponderous grace, the Warlord Titan took its first step forward. The deck quaked, and far below, mortal soldiers scrambled to clear the path of its titanic stride. Each footfall was a peal of thunder in the enclosed space. Valen allowed himself a final moment of satisfaction as the Bellum Caelus emerged from the hangar into the open air. The fog that blanketed the battlefield lapped at the Titan's ankles like a pale sea, swirling in toxic eddies. Somewhere out in that murk, heretics and traitors cowered. Perhaps even an enemy Titan lurked, hiding its cowardly bulk in the haze. If so, they would soon learn the wrath of Legio Exanimus. They would behold the Emperor's vengeance made metal and flame. The Princeps felt an almost cathartic calm as he led his crew and machine to war. Whatever specters haunted the ruins ahead, whatever nightmares the enemy had summoned from the fog, none of it mattered. He commanded a god engine of the Imperium, and with it, he would annihilate anything that dared stand before him. The Bellum Caelus led the advance into the ghost city, each stride devouring shattered roadway. In its wake, trundled columns of Imperial Guard tanks and armored carriers, but even the mightiest Baneblade was dwarfed by the Titan's silhouette. Princeps Valen watched the tactical hololith flicker on his command console, noting friendly units blinking green amid the urban ruin. A cluster of blue runes represented his fellow god engines of Legio Exanimus, spreading through adjacent sectors. A Reaver class and two smaller Warhound scout titans moving on parallel routes. Vox chatter from the ground crackled in Valen's ears, tinged with awe. Down below, infantry squads gazed up at the Bellum Caelus as it passed, appearing out of the sulphurous fog like a moving skyscraper. Some cheered, hurling praise to the Emperor and the Omnissiah. Others simply stood in reverent silence, faces upturned. Valen barely registered them, except as a pleasant boost to his already swelling pride. These soldiers were right to revere his Titan. It would accomplish in minutes what their whole regiment could not in a month. He kept his focus ahead, where the great manufactorum district of Perdition's Landing loomed in ruins. Smoke and mist mingled to cast the skyline in blurred outlines of broken spires and collapsed hab blocks. The rising sun was little more than a sullen glow behind the clouds.
VoxNet is degrading, Princeps.
Moderati Lyra reported. She tapped a feed on her panel, frowning.
Interference from the atmospheric conditions, perhaps.
Valen knew Lyra's careful tone meant something unusual was afoot. The fog itself was likely laced with toxins and particulate from months of war, but this level of Vox scramble was abnormal.
Maintain formation. Adjust to local comm protocols,
he said flatly.
We press on.
If there was a hint of unease stirring in his gut, he refused to show it. The tactical feed fizzled, momentarily obscuring the allied Titan runes in static before stabilizing. On the periphery of his vision, which now combined both his human sight through the cockpit viewport and the Titan's own far-view optics, Valen saw movement below. Through swirling banks of fog marched lines of guard infantry and chimera transports, spreading out to secure side streets. They were cautious, expecting ambushes behind every pile of rubble. The enemy was out here somewhere. Thus far, only the distant rumble of artillery and the crackle of distant gunfire signaled battle. This sector remained eerily quiet. Engineer Castus's voice crackled from an audio spike near Valen's ear.
Princeps, Auspex readings show elevated uncertain signatures.
The tech priest paused as he passed the machine spirit's data.
There is a warp resonance in the atmosphere.
Lyra glanced over her shoulder from the forward console.
Warp taint?
Her concern was evident. Valen set his jaw. Chaos sorcery. The infantry had whispered of such things. Ghosts in the fog, phantoms that left patrols gutted in the night. Valen had dismissed those as superstitious babble. But now Castus's instruments confirmed something was abnormal beyond simple rebel tricks.
Keep the machine spirit focused, Engine Seer.
Valen said curtly.
Whatever miasma the heretics have spread, our duty is clear.
Yes, Princeps.
Castus's reply was obsequious as always, but Valen did not miss the hint of concern underlying the flat binaric vocoder tone. Castus busied himself with adjusting harmonics and chanting calming mantras to the Titan's spirit. The Bellum Caelus gave a low groan of metal, as if unsettled. Valen felt it as a twitch in the back of his skull. He redoubled his mental grip on the Titan's psyche. Steady, old friend, he thought toward it, and the unease subsided. They advanced down a broad avenue flanked by ruined manufactorum halls. Enormous steel girders protruded from collapsed roofs like ribs from a carcass. Every alley and window was a potential threat, but the Titan's footfalls continued unchallenged. Valen found himself growing impatient. Where were the traitors? Even a garrison of cultists should have made some attack by now, however futile it would be in the end. His fingers drummed on the armrest of his throne. As if in answer, a new Vox transmission cut through the static, hissing and urgent. Any allied Titan, this is Paladin Company, 233rd Perdition armor. We are pinned at Crossroad 12A by hostile armor. Request. The message dissolved into static. Moderati Dren looked up from his targeting cogitator, sweat beading on his brow.
Princeps, did you catch that? Our armor units need support to the west.
His voice held a note of concern. On the hololithic display, Valen saw a flank company's rune blinking distress in a side grid. A rational commander might have diverted at least momentarily. A single salvo from the Warlord could flatten whatever opposition plagued those tanks. But Valen's eyes remained fixed forward, on the primary objective ahead.
Negative,
he said coldly.
We stay on mission. The infantry and armor will have to handle their skirmish. Our quarry lies ahead.
His tone left no room for debate. Dren clenched his jaw, clearly unhappy, but he replied with the proper
Yes, Princeps,
and returned to his console. Lyra's expression was neutral, but Valen caught the slight sag of her shoulders. The crew felt it, the burden of ignoring comrades in need. But Valen would not be swayed by sentimental distractions. A Titan did not play nursemaid to ground forces. A Titan won the war decisively by decapitating the foe. And if indeed an enemy Titan awaited, nothing could be allowed to slow his pursuit. They pressed on. The pleas for help faded behind them in the fog, swallowed by the crackling ether. Soon even the Imperial Voxnet fell to silence, every channel a distortion of whispers. The Bellum Caelus was moving into the heart of the eerily quiet city, effectively alone save for a few scattered cohorts of soldiers struggling to keep pace far below. Valen noticed that the blips marking his fellow Titans had winked out one by one on the hololith. Whether it was interference or something more ominous, he did not know. He told himself it was just the cursed atmosphere and the dense ferrocrete structures masking signals, yet a tightness had crept into the back of his neck.
Contact!
Lyra's shout broke the silence.
Multiple heat signatures, rooftops, 2 o'clock.
Valen swung the Titan's massive head to face the right flank, the motion swift despite Bellum Caelus's size. Sure enough, his enhanced vision picked out shapes in the gloom figures, scurrying on the upper floors of a half-collapsed hab block to their right. The Auspex pinged as it acquired dozens of targets, human-sized, scattered, likely ambushers.
Enemy sighted,
Valen rumbled.
Weapons free.
On that cue, Fire blossomed from the ruins. Contrails streaked in from the building, shoulder-mounted anti-armor missiles, kicking up trails of smoke. At the same time, stubber rounds and las fire flickered from lower windows, small arms peppering the Titan's legs in desperate fury. The missiles, though, were the real threat, or would have been if the Bellum Caelus were any lesser engine. A half-dozen warheads slammed toward them. Valen felt the impacts as dull thumps reverberating along the void shields. Blue energy crackled. 2 missiles exploded harmlessly against the invisible barrier mid-air. A couple more got through, smashing into the Titan's armored carapace with flashes of flame. Inside the cockpit, the shock was barely a shudder.
Void shields holding at 82%.
Lyra reported calmly, though her knuckles were white on the console. Valen sneered.
Return fire.
Dren whooped as he squeezed triggers.
Aye, Princeps! Firing plasma annihilator!
On the Titan's left arm, a colossal cannon swiveled and unleashed a sun-bright lance of energy. The beam stabbed through the fog, melting the upper stories of the hab block to slag in an instant. Concrete and steel vaporized. A thunderclap followed a heartbeat later, as air rushed into the vacuum of the beam's path. The building's entire side erupted in fire and smoke. Dozens of enemy heat signatures vanished at once from Lyra's auspex. The surviving cultists on lower floors broke, fleeing for any cover. Valen spotted them through the Titan's scope. Ragged figures scrambling like ants. Many wore the tattered uniforms of the local PDF, now daubed with profane chaos symbols. Heretics. He felt no remorse, only satisfaction as he directed the follow-up strike.
Mega Bolter, commence firing.
On the Titan's right arm, the massive rotary cannon spun up with a rising whine. A hail of shells the size of small missiles shredded the street and ruins where the cultists ran. Each impact was an eruption of dirt and blood. Valen let the torrent of destruction continue for a few extra seconds, ensuring nothing survived.
Cease fire,
he eventually ordered. The barrels of the Gatling blaster glowed red-hot as they wound down. The hab block was now half gone, a stump spitting flames into the murk. Whatever ambush had been planned here, it had been snuffed out almost as soon as it began.
Enemy threat neutralized,
Dren said. His earlier doubts were replaced by adrenaline-charged triumph.
That'll teach those traitor wretches.
Valen allowed himself a short breath of satisfaction. It was a display of power to put fear into any heretic's heart. One blast, hundreds dead. It reaffirmed everything he believed about Titan supremacy. Lyra's voice cut in, quiet and uneasy.
Princeps, picking up Vox transmissions from within the structure.
She leaned close to her receiver, brow furrowed. Through the hissing interference, faint human voices echoed, magnified by the Titan's auspex. Valen tuned in. At first it was just a garbled chorus. Then he caught fragments. Chants, not screams. The cultists were dying, crushed under debris and flame, yet some used their final breaths not to cry out, but to pray. A distorted litany rose from the ruin, amplified strangely by the acoustics of the half-collapsed building. The specter in the machine awakened the god within. O blessed shadow, take this vessel. The words dissolved into static and fading howls. Then there was silence. A chill crept down Valen's spine. Specter in the machine, God within. This was no typical heretic war cry. Engineer Castus let out a disturbed burst of binaric static from his corner, the equivalent of a whispered curse. Lyra made the sign of the aquila over her chest.
Emperor, preserve us,
she murmured.
What were they calling to?
Valen forced a dismissive snort.
Meaningless babble, the delusions of the damned.
Yet even he could not fully shake the disquiet those dying voices stirred. He quickly refocused on the mission.
Press forward. We're close to the central plaza.
The Titan resumed its march, stepping over the smoldering remains of the hab block. Valen pushed the pace, eager to put that unsettling moment behind them. The avenue widened, opening onto what had once been a grand square in front of the manufactorum gates. Now it was a canyon of wreckage, toppled statues, and burned-out vehicle husks littering the area. The fog here was thicker, clinging to the ground in lazy swirls despite the growing daylight. Something about it made the hairs on Valen's arms stand up.
Princeps, Auspex reading.
Lyra adjusted a dial, her voice hushed with confusion.
Showing a Titan-sized contact dead ahead, in the plaza.
Valen's pulse quickened. His own oculars scanned the plaza through Bellum Caelus's eyes. At first he saw nothing but mist and shadows. Then, looming in the center of the open square, he discerned a shape. It was immense, though not as tall as the Bellum Caelus, a silhouette of jagged angles. For one surreal moment, it did look like another Titan standing motionless in the fog. Valen's lips peeled back in a fierce grin.
At last, a worthy foe indeed.
He opened a Vox channel, his voice bold and amplified through his Titan's external speakers.
Unidentified Titan-class contact. This is Princeps Aurelius Valen of Legio Exanimus. Identify yourself or be destroyed.
His challenge rolled out across the plaza, echoing off ruins. No response came. The silhouette did not move. Dren muttered,
No return Vox, Princeps. Could be a trick.
Lyra's Auspex pinged urgently.
It's weird, sir. The sensor returns are fluctuating. One moment it reads like solid adamantium ahead. The next it's partially not there. Could be heavy interference.
Valen narrowed his eyes. The fog eddied, giving them clearer glimpses. The shape was not a Titan. Not exactly. It was a grotesque effigy assembled in the middle of a blood-stained mandala painted on the ground. Valen magnified the visual. He saw the remains of cranes and manufacturum machinery twisted together into a mockery of a bipedal form. Towering on two slagged legs, it had arms of scaffold and rebar, and atop it a monstrous head-like structure made from a giant furnace vent. Around its feet were mounds of bones. Some of them were disturbingly large, as if from some great beast. The entire construct was smeared with runes in glistening crimson. Fresh blood, still dripping, patterned the mandala on the ground, a chaos ritual circle at least 100 meters across. Valen felt his stomach turn at the sheer scale of sacrilege.
What in the throne's name?
Dren breathed, forgetting protocol in his shock.
Is that a statue?
Lyra's voice trembled.
Those cranes. That furnace. I think it's the main smelter from the manufactorum. They've raised it up like an idol.
Valen gritted his teeth. An elaborate heretical display. This must be the core of their ritual. The enemy Titan's signature had led him right here, perhaps by design. His hands tightened on the controls.
It's a summoning site,
he growled.
Blasphemers. They think to conjure a demon in the shape of a god machine.
He would give them no time to finish their profane work.
Target that construct and the center of the pattern. Now.
Even as he spoke, however, a new signal howled through the Bellum Caelus's spirit sensors. A psychic shockwave rippling out from the plaza. The blood-roaned mandala began to glow, a sickly emerald light seeping up from the earth. And the towering effigy of scrap and bone moved. With a tortured screech of metal, the improvised colossus raised its head. Inside the furnace mouth of its visage, hellish green fire ignited. The construct took one staggering step forward, ripping free of cables and chains that had held it aloft. The ground shook as it planted a foot made of fused machinery. What should not have been capable of motion was moving, animated by some impossible force. Lyra gasped, her hands flying across the console to adjust targeting solutions.
Auspex reading spiking. Whatever it is, it's real and it's hostile.
Valen bared his teeth in a snarl. He hoped masked the dread coiling in his gut.
All weapons, fire, destroy it now.
His voice rang with command, but in that moment, as the effigy's improvised arm of steel beams raised towards them, he felt a cold certainty. Something truly abominable had been unleashed, and it hungered for his god-engine's soul. The hell-forged effigy charged with horrifying speed. What had been a lumbering mass of scrap moments before now moved with predatory grace, propelled by unnatural vitality. Its makeshift arm, ending in a claw of twisted metal beams, scythed toward the Bellum Caelus. Valen thrust the Titan backward, enormous servos whining. A screech of tearing steel rang out as the claw raked across the Warlord's chestplate. Inside the cockpit, Valen hissed. The MIU translated the damage as a flare of hot pain across his own torso. Status runes blinked angrily. Superficial armor breach, no penetration.
Return fire, all batteries,
Valen barked, wrestling his fear into fury. Dren obeyed with a snarl of his own, triggering the plasma annihilator again at point-blank range. The lance of blue-white sunfire slammed directly into the enemy Colossus, blowing clean through its midsection. Fragments of molten metal and incinerated bone exploded out its back. The thing let out a piercing, unearthly howl, an almost animalistic roar amplified by the furnace mouth that was its head. It reeled, staggering from the catastrophic wound.
Direct hit!
Dren exulted. Through the dissipating plasma glare, they saw a gaping cavity in the creature's torso, green witchfire licking at the edges. Any normal war machine would have been annihilated, but the abomination did not fall, even as Lyra poured a volley from the megabolter into the hole. Shells detonating within its body. The demon construct began to knit itself back together. Tendrils of emerald fire leapt across the breach, dragging scraps of metal and debris upward to fill the gap. Twisted steel beams bent of their own accord, relacing like sinew and bone. Within seconds, the hole was closing.
Emperor's Wrath.
Lyra breathed.
It's healing itself.
Valen felt a cold sweat break out under his neural cap.
Impossible.
His denial rang hollow even to him. The evidence was right before their eyes. This was no mere automaton. A demon or warp entity was animating it, defying the laws of nature. The creature lunged anew, swinging a gigantic crane boom like a club. Valen braced. The impact came as a bone-rattling crash. The Titan's void shields flashed and collapsed under the strain, the boom smashing into Bellum Caelus's shoulder plating. Metal screeched. Inside, sparking explosions erupted from cogitator banks. Lyra cried out as her station showered her with a burst of sparks. Dren was thrown against his harness.
Void shields down!
Lyra shouted, pain pinching her voice.
One of our starboard shoulder mounts is damaged.
Valen's own vision blurred as the MIU fed back the Titan's pain. He bit down, tasting blood. He'd bitten his tongue. The demon engine pressed the advantage. A flood of smaller shapes swarmed in around it. Twisted silhouettes of cultists rushing forward like insects around a god. Some carried sigil-marked explosives, hurling them at the Titan's legs. Fire bloomed around Bellum Caelus's knees, minor tremors, but adding to the chaos. Valen ignored the gnats. The real threat was towering before him. He triggered the Titan's mighty weapons again at point blank. This time the megabolter, spraying a storm of shells into the effigy's head and arm. Chunks sheared away, an entire improvised claw finger blown off and clattering to the ground. The daemon staggered. But then, shockingly, it lurched forward and grabbed hold of the Titan. A collective gasp rang out in the cockpit as the scrap behemoth grappled Bellum Caelus. Its remaining arm wrapped around the Titan's waist, metal shrieking on metal. The Warlord shuddered, and alarms wailed. Valen felt a crushing pressure, like being caught in a vice. He slammed the Titan's massive power fist, built into its left arm, into the foe, trying to break free. Each piston-driven punch tore off pieces of the scrap thing, but it fought on with mindless strength. The demon effigy's head pushed close, furnace maw yawning. Valen realized with horror it was attempting to climb the Titan, like a beast trying to fell larger prey.
Get off me!
He roared, both aloud and psychically through the MIU. He forced the Titan to take a step back, servos groaning under the stress. For an instant, the Warlord broke the creature's grip. But then the demon's head snapped forward and struck. A geyser of corrosive green flame spewed from that furnace maw, splashing against Bellum Caelus's head and upper carapace. The cockpit illumination flickered as heat spiked. The armor held, but sensors flared white with overload. Valen's neural link seared. Blinding pain shot through his mind, as though his own face had been set alight. He screamed, clapping a hand to his temple. In that moment of agony, the Titan's machine spirit surged up, enraged and unchained. Valen felt it like a great beast awakening beneath him. The MIU's feedback overwhelmed him with a flood of sensations. He was the Titan, and the Titan was burning, enraged, wounded. It wanted to rip and tear, to kill without thought. Valen's consciousness wavered, drowning in the machine's wrath. Ghostly whispers curled through his mind. A voice, or many voices speaking as one, murmured his name. Aurelius. Aurelius. The tone was coaxing, almost gentle under the cacophony. He didn't recognize it. Through the cracked vox speakers in the cockpit, a distorted echo of that whisper manifested, making Lyra and Dren start in alarm. Valen's eyes darted wildly. The cockpit seemed to darken, streaked with dripping blood. Through the Titan's eyes, the ruins outside warped into a vision of horror. Heaps of corpses and looming shadows in the fog.
No, get out of my head,
Valen snarled, fighting to distinguish reality from warp-induced illusion. But the psychic pressure redoubled. A chorus of laughter, or screams, he could not tell which, rang through the Titan's auditory array. Moderati Lyra acted, her face ashen but determined.
Princeps Aurelius!
She shouted, using his first name to snap his attention. Valen dimly registered her voice like a beacon in the dark.
We have to fall back,
She pleaded. She had taken manual control of locomotion. The Titan managed a lurching step away from the possessed scrap giant.
Just for a moment. We must regroup, or it will crush us.
Her words cut through the haze. Valen seized on them, regaining a sliver of clarity. But along with clarity came fury. Retreat? No. He was princeps of this god engine. To turn his back even for a moment was anathema to his pride. And yet, every warning klaxon screamed that Lyra was right. In seconds, the demon would recover and be upon them again. Valen's heart pounded. He felt cornered, desperate, and in desperation a grim resolve formed.
No retreat,
He grated, voice raw.
We end this now, one way or another.
He throttled the reactor output higher, dangerously higher. The Titan's interior lighting flickered blood red, a sign of exceeding safe parameters. Engine Seer Castus's face jerked up on a secondary screen, sweat gleaming on his augmetic-laced brow.
Princeps, what are you doing? The machine spirit is unbalanced.
We are going to obliterate it.
Valen said through clenched teeth.
Prepare to initiate a plasma reactor overload on my mark.
There was a stunned beat of silence. Lyra twisted around in her chair, eyes wide.
Overload the reactor? Aurelius, sir, that will destroy the Titan.
Better that than let this abomination take it.
Valen snapped.
We'll turn this plaza into a crater and send that thing screaming back to the warp.
Princeps, this action is tantamount to tech heresy.
Castus protested, voice crackling. Conduits sparked and machinery rattled as the Titan took another heavy blow. The enemy had regained its footing and struck Bellum Caelus's leg, nearly toppling it. Castus hurriedly regained his balance.
The Bellum Caelus is sacred. You would annihilate the God machine.
Dren's voice cut in, high with panic and anger.
He's mad! Sir, with all due respect, we can't... We'll die! We have to pull back.
The young Moderati unbuckled himself from his seat, as if ready to physically interfere. The Titan rocked again from an external hit, the demon trying to wrestle it down, and Dren lost his footing, falling against the bulkhead. Valen did not hesitate. In a flash, he drew his sidearm, a bulky naval pistol he kept at his command throne. He aimed it at Dren across the smoky cockpit.
You will obey my command, Moderati,
he said, voice deadly soft despite the chaos.
Initiate the overload. That is an order.
Dren froze, eyes locked on the pistol, disbelief etched on his face. Lyra was shaking her head, as if unable to fathom this turn of events. But she knew Valen, and she knew his order was final. With a trembling hand, she reached over and keyed in the code sequence on her console to prime the reactor overload.
Good,
Valen said, not lowering the weapon. Dren swallowed hard and scrambled back into his chair to assist Lyra, tears of frustration in his eyes, but his training compelling him to comply. Castus's voice came cold and ritualistic now, as if reciting a funeral rite.
Overload sequence initiated. Machine spirit howls in agony. May the Omnissiah forgive us.
Deep in the Titan's core, huge control rods began withdrawing from the plasma reactor, safeties overridden. The hum of the engine turned into a high-pitched whine. In the cockpit, warning runes flared on every panel, red flashes indicating critical reactor buildup. Time to maximum overload. 2 minutes, ticking down. Valen felt a pang of something as he looked at his crew. Fear in Dren's eyes, sorrow in Lyra's, quiet resignation in Castus's hollow image. Was it guilt? He crushed the feeling. If this was the price to destroy the demon, so be it. A princeps pays any price. The enemy must have sensed the threat, for it let out a screech that rattled the teeth in Valen's skull. It hurled itself at the Titan with renewed ferocity, the hunger in its aura palpable. Valen fired every weapon left at his disposal, plasma blasts, missiles, point defense lasers, turning the air into a kaleidoscope of death. The construct was ripped into again and again, yet still it came on, reforming, fueled by rage. It slammed into Bellum Caelus once more, driving the Titan back onto one knee. Metal ground against metal. The reactor whine grew louder, nearing its catastrophic crescendo. Inside the Titan, Engine Seer Castus unshackled himself from his station.
I must appease the spirit, or it will never let go,
he said, perhaps to himself. His voice was oddly gentle now, almost compassionate, as he regarded the ritual atame he drew from his robes. A knife etched with circuit scripture.
Princeps, I go to calm the heart. Do what you must.
Before Valen could respond, Castus was gone from the screen. The tech priest rushed into the Titan's dim inner passage that led toward the reactor core. Through the MIU, Valen felt the Titan's agony and wrath intensifying. The machine spirit was on the verge of frenzy as overload approached.
1 minute to detonation,
Lyra said quietly, more a prayer than a report. Valen steadied himself. His plan was working. The demon was too focused on them to escape, and in a minute, both would be ash. Suddenly, a new sensation ripped through Valen's mind, a searing shock, then an inundation of otherness. The reactor's machine spirit, normally kept tame, roared with the heat of a newborn star. And something else was there with it. The demon, forcing its way in like a parasite burrowing into a host. It was inside the Titan. Valen convulsed, the MIU feeding pure chaos into his skull. One moment he was in the cockpit. The next it was as if he stood in an abstract inner landscape, an endless hall of churning cogs and flowing plasma. At the center, the Titan's core glowed bright, and a shadowy figure clawed at it, a silhouette of darkness wreathed in green flame. Opposing it was a smaller shape, radiating white light. Castus, the engine seer's spirit, interposed between the demon and the core, chanting the canticles of banishment. The demon shrieked, a formless black fury swiping at Castus's light. Valen sensed his tech priest's life force flicker under the assault. Castus was sacrificing himself, burning out his soul to ward the demon off the Titan's heart. Back in reality, Lyra saw the Princeps go rigid, blood trickling from his nose and ears.
Princeps Valen!
She cried, shaking him. Valen's eyes were rolled back, his mind locked in battle unseen. Yet Valen fought. In that psychic battlefield, he summoned every ounce of will. Memories flashed through him, his first binding to Bellum Caelus, the triumphs they'd had, the oath he swore to never let this sacred engine fall. This Titan is mine, he roared silently into the void, throwing himself into the fray. He joined Castus's fading light, imagining himself grasping the demon's shadowy form. It was like plunging his hands into tar, but he held on, pulling it back from the core. The enemy's attention shifted to him. He felt a jolt of searing cold as it clawed at his very soul. In the material world, a horrifying scene unfolded. Bellum Caelus's mighty form spasmed. The green fire that flickered around the demon began to snake along the cables, linking the two giants. For a heartbeat, both Titan and demon were connected by tendrils of warp energy. A sound like a deep groan emanated from Bellum Caelus's vox grill, half-human bellow of pain, half-machine roar. The Titan took an involuntary step forward, as if puppeted. Moderati Dren spotted a slick warp tendril slithering through a rear vent, winding along an overhead plasma conduit toward the command throne. If it reached them, something in Dren snapped into resolve. He tore off his helmet and raced toward the back of the cockpit, climbing a ladder toward the conduit access.
Dren, what are you doing?
Lyra shouted, but the Moderati didn't answer. He reached the maintenance alcove by the conduit. Intense heat radiated from the plasma tubing, blistering his skin. The warp tendril sensed him and whipped violently, searing his leg. Dren gritted his teeth against the pain. There was a manual purge valve on the conduit, used only in extreme emergencies, to vent plasma out of the Titan's cooling system. Grasping the valve wheel with both hands, Dren began to turn with all his might. In the psychic battle within the Titan's soul, Valen felt another presence join, a burst of defiant mortal courage. Dren's action was physical, but in this war of spirits, it appeared as a sudden surge in the Titan's own strength. Superheated plasma gushed from piping along the Titan's hull outside, manifesting as jets of blinding blue flame shooting out of Bellum Caelus's back and shoulders. One of those jets speared into the daemon's scrap construct body, severing the tendrils connecting it to the Titan. The daemon howled in rage and pain. Inside, the tendril in the cockpit sizzled and vaporized just as it was closing around Dren's waist. The young Moderati was engulfed in the backblast. A flash of actinic fire, and then nothing. Lyra cried out as she saw his silhouette vanish in the explosion of plasma. On the psychic plane, the dark shadow recoiled, weakened. Castus's light flared one last time. The engine seer chanted a final litany, voice full of fervor.
Machine God, cast out the impure. By steel and by faith, be exorcised.
His form then winked out, snuffed like a candle, the last of his life spent. Valen roared and hurled the demon's presence with all his mental might. There was a sensation of something tearing, a veil ripping. A keening wail reverberated through both the warp and the air around the Titan. The scrap construct, riddled with plasma fire and missing chunks of its form, spasmed and began to collapse, whatever force animating it withdrawn. At that exact moment, a piercing chime sounded in the cockpit, the reactor overload countdown reaching final seconds. Lyra, thrown to the floor by the convulsions moments before, pulled herself up enough to slam her palm onto the emergency abort stud.
Reactor safety's engaged,
She yelled into the smoke-filled cockpit, praying it wasn't too late. Valen's consciousness snapped back to reality as abruptly as if he'd been doused in ice water. The MIU link re-established his senses. He saw the construct demon finally topple backward in front of them, crashing to the plaza ground in a heap of inert debris. Wisps of sickly green fire flickered out and died. The nightmarish presence in his mind was gone, retreated to whatever hell had spawned it. He gasped for air, realizing he'd been holding his breath. His body felt broken and weak. Blood dripped from his nose onto his chest plate, but he was alive. They had survived. The Princeps looked around the cockpit. Smoke hazed the air. Lyra was coughing but alive, struggling to stand. Of Dren there was no sign. The back half of the cockpit was blackened and charred, small fires guttering where coolant and plasma had vented. Valen's stomach lurched.
Castus!
Lyra managed, slumping into Dren's now empty seat and trying to bring up the engine seer's vitals on a screen. The display was dark. No response. Valen knew in his heart both men were dead. Castus's last act had been to purge the demon from the Titan's spirit. Dren's last act had saved them from being consumed physically. The realization came slowly through the adrenaline and shock. His arrogance had cost them their lives. Outside the plaza was a ruin of steaming metal and scorched ground. The demon's vessel was nothing more than a melted pile of scrap now. Dawn's light, filtered through haze and smoke, fell upon a scene of utter devastation. The reactor whine mercifully began to subside as control rods slammed back into place. The Titan was badly damaged but still operable, just shy of the point of self-destruction. The cockpit lighting normalized to a dim glow. A heavy silence followed, broken only by Lyra's quiet sobbing as she realized the emptiness where Dren and Castus had been. Valen sagged in his command throne. He felt ancient, drained. His body trembled with fatigue, shock, and something else.
Moderati.
He began, voice cracking.
Report. Status.
Lyra sniffed, wiping soot and tears from her cheek as she forced professionalism back.
Reactor. Stable for now,
She said softly.
Weapons systems. Plasma annihilator offline. Ammo reserves low. Void shields destroyed. Motive systems at 40%. We're alive, Princeps.
She gave a shaky breath that might have been a bitter laugh. Alive, out of sheer luck and the sacrifice of their crew. Valen could not meet her eyes. He stared out through the cracked viewport at the morning mist rolling over the carnage. 2 of his crew gone, his Titan savaged but standing. A Pyrrhic victory of the highest order. His hubris and determination to charge ahead had led them into a trap that nearly doomed them all. Lyra broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper.
Was it worth it, sir?
It was not accusation, but genuine, broken-hearted doubt. In that simple question lay the weight of all their losses. Valen had no answer. The proud retorts that once would have leapt to his tongue were ashes now. He closed his eyes, feeling the ache of the Titan's wounds as his own. Dren's empty station to his left, the absence of Castus, both speaking volumes. After a long moment, Valen forced his eyes open and looked to Lyra.
Their sacrifice will be honored,
he said quietly, the only promise he could offer.
We stopped it. That thing, it would have been far worse had we failed.
Lyra nodded faintly, turning back to her console. Valen could see her shoulders shaking as she composed herself.
Awaiting your orders, Princeps,
she said, steadying her tone, ever loyal, even now. Valen swallowed against the tightness in his throat.
First, let's get the Titan back on its feet.
The Bellum Caelus still knelt on one damaged knee. He pushed the control yoke gently. With a tortured metallic groan, the Warlord Titan heaved upright, rising to full height once more. Its banners and paint were blackened, smoke trailing from dozens of rents in its armor, but it still stood, triumph and tragedy in one. An unnatural quiet fell over the plaza in the wake of the demon's defeat. Only the crackle of fires and the distant thunder of war remained. Princeps Valen slumped in his throne, exhausted, with Lyra the sole remaining crew at his side. For a moment, it seemed the nightmare might truly be over. Then across the plaza, a towering silhouette emerged through the haze. Unmistakably another Titan, striding forward. This one was grotesquely altered. Corroded armor adorned with spikes and grisly trophies, chaos sigils aglow on its carapace. A harsh voice crackled over the vox, dripping with malice.
Well done dispatching our pet little Princeps. Now you face Execrator and you will fall.
Valen's blood boiled at the taunt. He shut off the vox link, stifling his retort. This was it. A true Titan duel, coming at the worst possible moment. Bellum Caelus stood battered and half crippled, and yet he had no choice but to face the foe head-on.
Princeps, Aurelius,
Lyra said softly.
we have minimal weapon capability. No voids. How?
She trailed off. She did not need to complete the question. Valen surveyed their readouts, or what remained functional. The plasma annihilator was offline and nearly drained. The megabolter had perhaps a single drum of munitions left unspent. Their void shields were gone. Even a glancing hit from the foe's guns would bite straight into armor. Bellum Caelus was wounded in both spirit and body. Under normal logic, they should withdraw and wait for reinforcements. But they had no chance of escape. In their state, they could not outrun the traitor Titan. And behind them stood the vulnerable Imperial forces of Perdition's landing. If they could not hold the line, the foe would butcher those soldiers without mercy. There was no choice.
We hold the line,
Valen said hoarsely.
like they did. We make our stand and damn the odds.
He forced steel into his voice.
Moderati and Taulis, Lyra, send a wide band to all friendly forces. Tell them to pull back and regroup. We will delay the enemy Titan as long as we can.
Her eyes glistened, but she nodded and voxed the order. Execrator did not wait for them to finish. It opened fire while still striding through the ruins toward them. A trio of lurid laser beams lanced out from its arm batteries, slicing through the air. Valen barely managed to jolt Bellum Caelus aside. One beam sheared a ruined hab block beside them, carving molten furrows through concrete. Another skimmed the Titan's left shoulder plate, sending a spray of sparks and molten metal rattling across the cockpit canopy. Valen grunted as pain flared along his left side from the now far too intense MIU feedback. He retaliated with their own Gatling blaster, triggering a hail of high-caliber rounds. The shots peppered Execrator's frontal armor to little effect, many deflected or exploding harmlessly. A few found a mark in a damaged plate, evidence that this traitor engine had been bloodied already, likely from ambushing Valen's comrades elsewhere. But it was still far less damaged than Bellum Caelus. The enemy fired its second main weapon, a booming discharge from a massive warp-fueled cannon on its right arm. A sphere of crackling, sickly energy hurtled forth, leaving a violet trail. It hit before Valen could even attempt an evade, slamming square into Bellum Caelus's chest. The Titan rocked backward as if punched by a god. An entire slab of frontal armor disintegrated under the impact, metal bubbling away in unnatural corrosion. Valen cried out as agony lanced through his mind. It felt as though his ribs had been torn open. Sparks rained inside the cockpit. Lyra was knocked from her seat, and one of the secondary consoles burst into flames. Warning runes flared everywhere.
Hull breach in forward decks,
She reported, coughing.
Structural integrity down to 30%.
Valen tasted copper in his mouth, but he forced Bellum Caelus to keep moving. The wounded Titan trudged onward, meeting the traitor's advance head-on. If they stayed back, Execrator would gun them down at range. Their one chance was close combat, where perhaps some stroke of fortune or skill could even the odds.
Aiming for their weapon joints,
Valen growled, forcing calm into his voice. Lyra, back at her station, adjusted targeting as best she could, with half their auspex dead. Bellum Caelus raised its one functional arm cannon and loosed another volley at the enemy's right arm. A missile rack on Bellum's carapace also spat out the last of its payload. A spread of rockets screaming toward the foe. Explosions dotted Execrator's silhouette. One missile managed to strike near the base of the warp cannon, blowing apart an armored shield. The war machine bellowed, its sound an electronic snarl echoing across Vox. That hurt it. Seizing the moment, Valen urged Bellum Caelus into a lumbering charge. One of the Titan's leg actuators groaned, on the verge of seizing, but the machine gave him all it had. Step by step, it closed the distance, even as Execrator recovered and leveled its laser batteries for another shot. A blinding lance speared out. Bellum Caelus's right arm suddenly vanished in a shower of slag, severed at the elbow by the precision beam. Molten metal splattered. The Titan lurched, nearly losing balance. Valen snarled in pain, as if his own arm had been cut off. Yet they had momentum now. With a final titanic stride, Bellum Caelus slammed bodily into Execrator. The collision of the two Titans was like a mountain striking another. The shockwave knocked flat every remaining wall in the plaza and threw nearby armored vehicles onto their sides. Lyra screamed as she hung onto her console to avoid being flung about. Valen's vision blackened for a heartbeat from the Force. But when it cleared, he found their Titan entwined with the enemy. Bellum Caelus had locked its remaining arm around Execrator's torso, grappling desperately. Servos strained and whined. The traitor engine staggered off balance. Execrator's Princeps, whoever he was, howled curses audible over external vox amps. The Chaos Titan thrashed, bringing its weapon arms in close to try and free itself. Its warp cannon struggled, unable to fire point blank without risking entanglement. Valen realized grimly that he had succeeded in blinding the enemy's guns by sheer proximity.
Lyra, divert all remaining power to the plasma reactor.
Valen hissed through gritted teeth.
Prep to vent on my mark.
This was the final gamble. The Titan had little left to give, but its reactor still churned with barely contained fury from the earlier aborted overload. Lyra understood immediately.
Sir.
Do it,
Valen replied, steel in his tone. She nodded once, tears streaking through grime on her cheeks, and rerouted every reserve into the plasma reactor. Control safeties were already damaged. It didn't take much coaxing to send the core into critical buildup again. Valen felt the heat rising beneath them, a low rumble in the Titan's gut, ready to explode outwards. Exhausted, half delirious from pain, Valen opened his eyes and saw the infernal Titan's head, looming just beyond Bellum Caelus's ruined Vox grill. The two giants were locked in a death embrace. He bared his teeth and spoke a final time, broadcasting over open Vox.
No victory for you, heretic. The Emperor judges both of us this day.
A furious snarl crackled back.
Die with us then, fool!
Execrator's laser batteries began to charge for a point-blank blast that would gut them both. Valen did not give him the chance.
Now, Lyra,
he roared. She slammed both hands onto the manual vent triggers. The plasma reactor at Bellum Caelus's core released all its fury in one focused torrent. A beam of superheated plasma erupted from the Warlord's chest, the emergency vent port blown wide open. It speared straight through Execrator's torso, an artificial miniature sun unleashed at zero range. The traitor Titan didn't even have time to scream. The plasma blast caught it from within, vaporizing crew, machinery, and the tainted heart of the engine. In an instant, Execrator went rigid, its limbs locking up as if in shock. Then its entire upper body detonated in a catastrophic explosion of flame and shrapnel. The headless, half-melted hulk toppled backward in slow motion, crashing to the earth and collapsing into a heap of burning scrap. At the moment of release, Bellum Caelus was also hurled back. The reactor venting had saved them from total self-destruction, but the force of it was like a volcanic eruption. Systems blew out in cascades of sparks. The Titan's back snapped against a collapsed manufactorum crane as it fell. Valen felt a horrendous jolt as they crashed into the ground. When the world stopped spinning, a ringing silence hung in the cockpit. Valen blinked slowly. Half the displays were dark. The daylight pouring in through a gaping tear in the Titan's hull told him Bellum Caelus lay sprawled on its side amid the ruins. The once mighty god engine was now a wreck, barely more than a broken shell. But Execrator was utterly destroyed. Valen could see its burning corpse through the torn hull, a pyre of black smoke under the overcast sky. He let out a shuddering breath. Pain flooded in as sensation returned. His left arm hung limp, likely broken, blood crusted over his eyes from a forehead gash. He turned his head with effort.
Lyra?
She was alive, stirring feebly where she hung in her restraints.
I'm here.
She managed, voice thin. She had a nasty cut along her scalp and was trying to blink away blood herself. Valen tried to move, but in that moment, a wave of dizziness and fatigue finally overwhelmed him. The last thing he saw as he slumped back into the throne was Lyra struggling to free herself, calling his name in a voice that echoed, strangely distant, down an ever-lengthening tunnel of darkness. Grey dawn light crept through broken clouds as recovery teams circled the smoking hulk of Bellum Caelus. The Warlord Titan lay shattered amid the ruins, half submerged in rubble and ash. Its armor was scorched black, banners hung in tatters, hydraulic fluid steamed in the mud around its feet. There was no triumphant fanfare here, only the crackle of distant fires and murmured prayers of the living. A few guardsmen gazed up at the fallen god engine in silent awe and dread. One mud-streaked trooper, Jonas, stared as if at a slumbering giant before turning away to help carry a wounded comrade. The Titan's cooling metal emitted a low groan in the hushed plaza. Medici and red-robed engineers clambered up the Titan's ruined hull, chanting binary litanies to calm its machine spirit. They found Valen alive, yet not truly alive in any ordinary sense. When Medici attempted to unplug the Princeps MIU cables, his body convulsed violently, Auspex readings spiking in alarm. The thick conduits at the base of Valen's skull pulsed with raw data, as if the man's neurons were entwined with the Titan itself. Where flesh met metal, there was no clear boundary. Interface ports had fused into his body and spine. Each time the tech priest severed even a minor link, Valen's vital signs faltered, and the Titan let out a low, animal groan from deep within its reactor core. After agonizing minutes, the Medici conceded defeat. Removing him would be fatal. Princeps Valen and Bellum Caelus were now irreversibly conjoined in body and soul. Wordlessly, the Mechanicus adepts and Medici exchanged grave looks. Princeps Valen's survival was a hollow victory. He lived, but only as an extension of the god engine now. The Omnissiah has bound them, one tech priest intoned in a buzzing electrotone, whether in awe or despair it was hard to tell. They could not free Valen from the throne any more than they could extract the machine's spirit from its adamantine hull. At length, they stabilized what they could, setting auto-sutures and support fluids to sustain his organic parts, then withdrew to confer. The decision was inevitable. The Bellum Caelus would be repaired in due time, and its princeps would remain permanently interred within its iron womb. Entombment was the only path now. Valen would never walk among mortal men again. He would know only the cold glow of the Titan's lumen lamps and the ceaseless hum of its reactor core. On the edge of consciousness, Valen drifted between pain and a strange tranquility. He could hear muffled voices around him, excited, fearful, reverent, but they were distant echoes compared to the deep, resonant heartbeat of the Titan that now matched his own. He did not speak, he could not, but a faint neural impulse from Valen's mind caused one of the Titan's shattered optic sensors to flicker. The tech priest started at the sign. The god engine responded where the man could not. Princeps Valen was awake and aware. Mechanicus adepts labored to tend the Titan's wounds, chanting rites of repair that mingled with the crackle of sparking welders and the grind of heavy servos. Acolytes connected new life support tubes into Valen's veins and diagnostic cables along his spine, each link consecrated with a murmured prayer. Valen remained strapped to his throne, gaunt face, serene in the dim light, more relic than man, eyes vacant and unblinking. He offered no hint of awareness as Medici drones flitted around him. Yet the Bellum Caelus itself quivered when a massive shard of plating was hoisted from its hull, as if man and god machine winced as one. Hours later, when the rites of examination were done, the Titan secured and hauled back into a hangar. A hushed gloom settled over it. The colossal silhouette of Bellum Caelus loomed, silent and scarred yet unbowed. At its heart, Aurelius Valen persisted, entombed but unbroken. When war called again, Bellum Caelus would rise to answer, and Valen with it, bound forever to the god engine's wrath and sorrow. A solitary maintenance light pulsed atop the Titan's head like a fading star, casting fleeting shadows through the incense-laden air. Valen's heartbeat thumped in tandem with the great engine's core. There was no peace here, only the endless vigil of man and God machine, bound in solemn communion until the dying of the light. Thus ends the saga of the Specter of the God Engine, its echoes drifting into the ether. In the grim darkness of our age, victory rarely comes without cost. Consider, Shardwalker, what would you sacrifice to triumph against such a horror? We invite you to inscribe your reflections in the commentarium below. If this tale has stirred your soul, do not let it be lost to the void. Honor this chronicle with a like, and ensure you are counted among our number by subscribing. Sound the great bell of notification, that you may be alerted when the next nightmare is unleashed. Remember, even as we face horrors on the battlefield, some of our brethren fight battles unseen within themselves. To those souls, you are not forgotten. The noble cause of Stack Up stands with you, a beacon of hope in the darkness of the mind. We salute their compassion and courage. Should you wish to aid our crusade further, you may offer tribute through the Ko-fi shrine. As always, support is appreciated, not mandated. All such links await you in the archives below. Farewell, Shardwalker, until we meet again. Carry this shard with you, and let its lessons temper your soul. The Emperor protects.